All right, we're live. What's going on, Josh? How are you?
Doing great, man. How are you?
Very good. Guys, welcome back. Let's see who joins us here for another episode of Talking Ship, where we dive deep into the old CrossFit archives. Today we have kind of a theme. Some days I just throw shit out at random and watch old stuff that like really grab my attention, but today we're going to go through old powerlifting stuff. There was this weird moment. And what year did you start in CrossFit?
I heard about it in 2010, I believe.
Okay.
And me and a couple of my buddies had just played around with some of the workouts from main site. And then I walked into an affiliate in 2011.
Okay, awesome.
So
So
yeah.
that was probably about the time that all this shit started happening. So I
Yeah.
got in at 2008-ish, and when I first got in, there was like almost no media. There was very little collaboration going on in the space. They had just started making partnerships with like outside like subject matter experts like
Yeah.
powerlifters.
Right.
And so probably 2010 or maybe a little before is when we started seeing people like Boz and Tony Budding go to like West Side Barbell and work with Louie Simmons. So they brought in Rippetoe, actually probably earlier years, to do some of their strength stuff. They had Dave Tate, who's also like a West Side disciple, do a bunch of seminars for them. And so there started to be this like, and I think there was a little bit of push and pull with that, no pun intended, with powerlifting, but like because I think these guys were all very different in their styles. And I think so people gravitated to one personality or the other and kind of stuck with what they liked best. But I don't know, I figured it'd be fun to go through some of the powerlifters and put our kind of spin on our thoughts on that stuff.
When I first got into CrossFit, that was one of the things that really drew me to want to participate in the sport and just the methodology in general, because at the time I felt like they were like, let's find the best minds from the fitness world at large, bring them in and have these subject matter experts tell us like how everything works based on their field. And so I felt like I didn't have to go around the internet to search for all these things that I wanted to learn. I could just go to CrossFit or CrossFit Journal and learn a bunch of stuff there. And obviously that's shifted over the years. It would be awesome if a lot of that information was centralized so that people that are just getting into it could, I mean, they can go back and watch the old stuff, which we're about to do. But yeah, it was really, really inspiring to me and made me want to not just be knowledgeable about CrossFit as a methodology or as a sport. It helped define CrossFit for me. So it was like, rather than thinking of it as a certain training program or this and that, it seemed like the MMA of training, like just take best practices from everything. We're going to throw out what's trash and then use that to make the most well-rounded fit individuals. And I was like, dude, this is like right up my alley. I'm so excited about this idea.
That's funny. I've never heard it called that, the MMA of like fitness training. That's actually a really good way to put it.
Dude.
I've never thought of that.
That's how I saw it from, because I have a boxing background. And so like MMA, when that was first coming out, I was like, prior to getting into CrossFit and I was just training boxing, like my hands hurt all the time. I just, it's kind of a destructive sport, which should shock no one, but CrossFit felt like boxing. It felt like training for boxing. You still get that intensity. All those endorphins are flying around. You're doing stuff that's really hard. It takes balls and guts to get through workouts and stuff. And that really appealed to me. And at the same time, I didn't feel like it was destructive. I felt like it was building me up and making me stronger and fitter. And so, yeah.
Before you get into like a sparring match or a training session with boxing, do you have the same level of anxiety you had before you do a Metcon? Or at least before I do a Metcon?
For sure. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's different because, I mean, I guess it depends on who you're sparring and, who you're going up against. Because if I get smoked by someone in a CrossFit gym, I just lose. Whereas like if you're outmatched in the ring, you're going to get hurt. And I would say if you're prepared for, a sparring session or a boxing match or whatever, it's less scared and more anxious and ready and eager. And I feel like the best athletes in CrossFit feel that way when they're about to walk onto the floor. It's kind of like, sorry to go off on a tangent here.
No, go.
Like if there's some people who, let's say they get into a fight, they're wired a certain way. This is most people actually. If they get punched in the face, their initial instinct is to avoid that event happening again. So they're either
Right.
going to run, they're going to cover up, they're going to be like, stop the fight. Like, or after the fight, they're like, I don't want to do this anymore, you know?
Right.
And then there's some people that are wired a certain way to where when they get punched in the face, they're like, oh, it's on. Okay, let's do it. Like they like it. They want. And so I think that in order to get to a competitive elite level in CrossFit, you can't get there unless you're wired that way. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I guess I had never thought of it in that analogy without my boxing background, but that's like, that's because, yeah, but that I'm the type, if you punch me in the face, I'm just going to get mad and probably run away. But I don't know if it's on or not. But yes, I've never thought about that in terms of athletes, like being pre-wired in a sense to be able to do it or not be able to do it in their reaction. Because I'm always, I guess everyone can do CrossFit, and a lot of people have this idea of what it's like to be competitive and take different stages. I guess part of my coaching, and I'm sure this is a thing that you and your wife Haley also do, is you start to direct the energy that the mental energy they have from that. So the excitement, the passion, the drive they have, whether they react, strong or poor from a certain lift, or they're running away from the pain of a metcon at high intensity or whatever. There's a way to sort of take that emotional reaction and sort of direct it, if you will, give them things to focus on or whatever else. But you're right. There's probably people who are pre-wired that can handle that better and just end up making all this crazy progress super fast, as opposed to those who need to learn how to harness that and apply it a certain way.
A perfect example of that, I've used this on addressed this on other podcasts, but the first open WOD, I believe, with Dallin Pepper and Taylor Self, is a perfect example. The guys both sent it for sure. And that workout, like they're both extremely fit. So they both have the capabilities to put up phenomenal scores, right? In my opinion, the separating factor there was just Taylor. He is wired a certain way. And he was like, I'm going to put the pedal on the floor and we're going to see who can hang on. And that, in my opinion, is a fighter's mentality. I love seeing that in CrossFit. I feel like that was very prevalent a little bit earlier. It's felt a little bit more like an endurance sport in recent years.
Sure.
Sometimes, like at least just the tone and like what the athletes look like out on the floor sometimes. But I think back to Rich and Josh doing the hand over hand, like sled pull to the finish. And I'm like, that's a fight, like that's not a race. That's a fight,
Yep.
And I love that element of CrossFit. It's kept me engaged for years.
Yeah, that's what drew me in at the very beginning, is that sort of competitive element. And I've said this a million times too, but that, and also my first years of watching the games, not live, but downloading the wave files off CrossFit.com was the stuff at Aromas, like running around, kicking up dirt, like, bloody knees, like just the rough and tumble version of it is what really pulled me into that, just the rawness of it.
For sure.
Anyway, what's going on, guys? We have a nice little group joining us now. All right, so we're going to get into some powerlifting stuff. Both talk about how it kind of relates back to what we did. Who do you want to start with? We have Louie Simmons, Mark Rippetoe, or Dave Tate. We have short clips from each of them.
Let's jump in with Louie.
All right, Louie.
Cool.
Let's get going here.
As a powerlifting coach and strength coach.
Oh, what just happened? I just lost my video.
I don't know if you know this. I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
A close stand squat and a wide stand squat. What's the difference in quadricep muscle fiber action?
I don't know.
None. It's been proven in university because of me.
There's no difference, or there's
none. No noticeable difference. When you squat, you don't push your feet downward. You push your feet to the sides. That's how you activate the hips. You ever watch an ice skater take off or a sprinter from the rear?
Yeah.
Well, you should squat the same way. You have to have external rotation to squat. And box squatting, I've had Olympic lifters come here because they can't squat, and they go, I'll say, take your stance. Well, we can't. Well, all that flexibility goes down the tube, and I ask them to take your feet apart. The real world, you got your feet apart. When we fight like this, anything you're doing, you got your feet up. You don't have your feet in here. No sport in the world, you got your feet in here.
Right. First thing you do is
I want Budding's shirt.
See,
I know.
There's just no comparison.
20 years ago, I don't get it.
Do we close stand squat? Yes. And can we kick everyone's ass? Yes, because we wide stand squat. A close stance will never build wide, but wide will build close.
okay.
Interesting.
That's why a sumo deadlift will build a conventional deadlifter. Box squat.
All right. What do you think about that? That little the close stance will never beat the wide stance squat. Do you ever use wide stance squats when you're training CrossFitters? If supposedly that's the best way to develop maximal strength?
Honestly, it depends on what we're talking about with CrossFitters. You know, are we talking about Joe Schmo? I just finished Barry's boot camp and I walked through the door,
That's
or are we
fair.
talking about elite fitness? We're trying to reach the top of the mountain.
Yeah,
I would say,
let's go elite, because with the
yeah,
affiliate classes, we're just kind of giving this general prescription, and we'll go around and kind of make the little tweaks, but you just want this like very functional squat for your like affiliate class. Let's talk about like and again, if you're comfortable chatting about her, Haley, and where you're taking her and her strength development.
yeah. I mean, we've done box squats, we've done wide stance squats, like more off season, to just for development and general strength. Sometimes, especially in the off season, we will break the lifts down into segments because we're not about to perform them in a race. So a lot of the off season stuff was box squats, wide stance squats, a lot of bodybuilding actually. So like focusing on specific individual muscle groups or developing areas that were underdeveloped prior. So like, for example, if someone is squatting up and they are slowing down during a portion of the lift, it's usually an indicator that they have a weakness muscularly when during that part of the lift where the required muscles are just underdeveloped, right? So we would be like, okay, how can we do that? How can we train, you know, the glute medius? And then we'd find bodybuilding protocols to specifically work on those muscle groups and then try to integrate those back into the movement or a segmented version of the movement, you know?
Do you find that works pretty well? A lot of times, obviously, you get stronger by doing bodybuilding type hypertrophy sets, and
Yeah.
when I use them basically for almost like strengthening specific joints as opposed to muscle groups, like the areas around like bicep curl for elbow health, things like that.
For sure. Yeah.
Do you find that like isolating particular areas of whatever to strengthen an area works with the hypertrophy sets, as well as like, you know, powerlifting is more about the higher weight, less rep. How do you find that balance?
I would usually use that to develop like a base of strength so that you can start a more traditional progression.
Like a pattern building thing almost.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, you know, in an accumulation phase for like a macro cycle, like the first couple weeks or however long your macro cycle is usually to prepare the athlete to be able to handle the training cycle. And so we would use those more for that. And then once it's time to actually implement progressive overload or, you know, linear progression, then now they're prepared to do that. They're prepared to handle that. And the risk of injury is going down because they have a little bit more strength in those areas where they either were weak prior or maybe they had a problem area because of what you're talking about, the joint health.
Yeah, I think that's a cool approach for it, building the base first and then making sure that the base can support what you're trying to add on top of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they jump into a serious program just from like the class or whatever, you know, they automatically assume, oh, okay, I'm ready to do whatever's programmed for the day. And it's like, well, you know, if you're serious about not getting injured, you want to make sure that you're prepared to handle that. If I don't run a marathon and then I just go out and do it, my calves are going to be destroyed. You know, like I could really do some serious damage. But if I prepare my body for that and then I go into it or go into the training for that, then I'm much more set up for success. So yeah.
Makes sense to me. And I guess we talk about like, so that's definitely easy to apply to like someone you're trying to take to the next level competitively, and then like thinking about how you would apply that to, at least how the way I would apply that to like an affiliate situation is I usually change my programming in the sense that I wouldn't have some sort of like rigid prescription. Everything is very like malleable and very go by feel or whatever, so people can continue to progress. Like that's one of the things I always talk about is like the percentages. So like powerlifters usually big on percentage work, things like that. In an affiliate style, I would never use that for a class because you have this wide variety of people who my base has to be like more flexible in the sense that like this woman over here who just started 2 weeks ago is building one kind of base, whereas my 5-day-a-week regular that's been coming for 8 years is still building bases in some way, but has to do it in a different way. So keeping the programming very general, I think, is the easiest way to do that for the masses.
And they have varying levels of recovery too. I think Dave Tate said one time that like a 1 RM deadlift takes roughly 2 weeks to recover from. And I'm like, well, I mean, if you're pulling like over 600 pounds, maybe, you know, because there's a lot more motor recruitment involved with that than if, you know, I get grandma coming in and she's just learning how to deadlift and we find a 1 RM for her. It's going to be different, you know.
She'll be fine in 30 minutes because it's not it's substantial. Yeah,
for sure. And then, you know, there's the other variables of like age, training history, all that stuff. So I think what you just laid out is a much better approach, and giving people the right options. I'm curious what you think about like gyms having a structured like cycles that they go through, even though you're going to have kind of a rotating door of people joining the gym and kind of jumping in midway. Do you think it's better to have a gym that's oriented towards, okay, we're going to peak during the open or during quarterfinals, just because that's the structure of the year, and so maybe during the summer we're working on more basic strength, all that stuff? Or do you think it's better for the general public to keep things a little more constantly varied?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of constantly varied. I guess in terms of that, you have so many factors, like you brought up a couple minutes ago, the recovery factor, right? So if you have this, if you have this cycle of, let's say, oh, we're having this 3 months or 2 months of focused on back squatting and deadlifting. Every Monday we're going to back squat, and every Thursday, Friday we're going to deadlift. Well, first of all, 25% of your members aren't coming on a Monday. So now for those months, they're never going to see a back squat, right? Probably the most important strength movement there is. They're never going to see it. And now the same applies to the deadlift. Someone's going to miss out on their deadlifts.
Right.
And then also, if you just give this regular dose of back squatting, or if you have this linear progression or progressive overload, or however you want to approach it, you're doing 5-3-1 in your gym, whatever you're doing, you're going to have people that they usually come on Monday, but now they missed a week. And so what do? Do they stay behind the class and go through last week's stuff? Or do they jump ahead and maybe miss their percentages, and now they're a little frustrated, and then retest week comes and they're not testing again? They just create, like, when you're trying to get between 75 and 300 gym members to stick to some more rigid outline of something, even if you loosen up the parameters, you're still going to have the majority of those who don't actually complete it fully the way it was designed. And on top of that, I have an issue with a lot of owners and coaches who don't go and do the work and the research to learn how to program effectively. And so what they're doing is they're just like, I don't want to learn, I don't want to adjust something, I'm just going to take this powerlifting program and apply it to my gym. Well, I got news for you. Powerlifters are usually very experienced when they follow programs like this, and they usually are assisted with something, a little extra recovery, something, right? Whereas the general population who's doing these volumes percentages don't have access to some of these recovery tools, we'll put it. And so,
and also your adaptation will be affected by, like, let's say you hit, a heavy squat progression on a day, and that's what your gym does. We will undo a lot of the adaptation that we may be seeking by doing a strength program because of the Metcon we're about to do, where we just also do like possibly 150 air squats, so, properly.
I think they can go hand in hand though, too. So I really think that there's a way to tie in higher intensity conditioning to be your accessory to your strength. And I think that comes back to how you program well as well. If you're mashing,
I was more referring to like an absolute strength style. If we were just following something, like starting strength or something completely aimed at getting stronger, and that's it.
Yeah, I get that.
So,
and kind of what I was just saying, this is actually a lucky segment here. We're going to look at some sled dragging from West Side.
Love it.
This is kind of like...
Just so I'm clear on the sled work, you guys do it on...
Is that Boz?
It's Boz, man. This fit perfectly with what we do in CrossFit. Lift, or, prior to the Metcon or during, and then you have some sort of conditioning strength aspect.
740 with straps, and I did nothing but sled pulls. And forever. And we had two South Africans here, the heavyweights, me and Gritter got the deadlift contest with them. Well, I had to pull 750 to win, and I pulled 750, and 3 minutes later I pulled 775. The only difference was I pulled heavy sleds.
So this is really simple.
It's just it's tiny, really. I mean, relative to
Ours was 19 pounds.
so this is it's 19 pounds with 135 pounds.
Yeah. When you walk like you
Sleds are
walk.
great.
It's
You
like
can
this.
go
Reach out,
short,
like when
heavy,
you catch a
fast,
pole.
or you
I
can go
love
long,
like,
slow
we use
sleds.
sleds
Pull,
all
boom,
the
boom,
time.
boom, pull.
I need
They're
to use
also
them
great.
more.
They're great for
Never run.
recovery because it's all concentrics, and
Yep.
concentrics really the more destructive
And I'll
part
tell you how
of
important sled dragging
resistance
is too.
training. And
I've
so
had
you're
chest
completely
dudes who've been
eliminating
trained
that.
for
You're able to get a
years
bunch of
before.
repetitions in
And a lot of
and
times I
target specific muscle groups if you want. I love sleds. I think they're one of the best tools in fitness.
Definitely underutilized, and it takes enough equipment, special space, all this stuff to get them into class. But if you can at least build them into like an extra thing that some can do,
For
like
sure.
massive
Also, I
opportunities there.
think for a lot of people's, especially like I would say, beginners, sure. A lot of people don't really know how to express power. So like if you're trying to jack their heart rate up, let's say you're like, let's say you stick them on a rower and they're brand new, like they may have issues with rowing technique. They may not be able to row efficiently enough to rev their engine up as high as you want it. But
Right.
if you stick someone on a sled and it's weighted appropriately and you're like, go, like their heart rate's going to spike through the roof. And I think it's also a great thing in Metcons if you're trying to just like punch somebody in the face in the middle of something and be like, okay, now go back and do the high skill thing,
Yeah, that's a great point. There's so many movements, not even just rowing, that people move so poorly with that you can't get the sort of stimulus you're looking for if you're looking for
Right.
something high intensity. Whereas a sled, you strap it to them, and you say, move as fast as you can across over to there. It's automatic. It just works
For sure.
automatically. Yeah.
Yeah. We had a piece a couple weeks ago. And it was, I remember thinking afterwards, basically what it was, we were trying to, work on sprints and high output for, roughly like a minute to 90 seconds with tons of rest. And, it was like something like a 10 to 15 cal air bike sprint, 20 unbroken chest bar pull-ups. Then you burpee broad jump all the way across the floor. It's like 8 to 10 reps. And then in remaining time for the 90 seconds, max, like, I think it was clean and jerk at like 225, 155, something like that. Right. And like, you would have to be as good as Haley is, in order to be able to hit each one of those elements correctly and get to that point. The whole point was power output, right?
Right.
And you could, if someone went through that and they just tried to do each one of those component parts, they would have to either split the chest bar, they couldn't crank it up high enough on the bike, or they didn't have the lactic endurance to like keep going on burpee broad jumps completely unbroken and then be able to pick up a barbell. But that's appropriate for where she's at, and plugging that into like a class just wouldn't make any sense at all. So yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to change it substantially to make
For
it
sure.
to
Yeah.
make it work for class. All right. Christian says Louie Simmons and Charles Poliquin didn't get enough love in the CrossFit space. Everyone does knees over toes guys accessories when they've been around forever. Thanks to the legend. Yeah. Yeah. Well, knees over toes guys, I think the AGT group just has a gentler way of presenting things to people.
Yeah.
It's hard to sell hardcore West Side barbell to your everyday aging population when it's very easier to sell some sort of, not that I'm selling either of them, but I'm just saying if someone's going to gravitate towards something.
Yeah. There's actually something interesting that I think you and JR touched on in a previous episode where JR was talking about rope climbs. And he was like, I can tell you need to go a certain speed on rope climbs. And you could look at me and be like, dude, that's incredibly fast. Like, what are you talking about? But if he can demonstrate it himself, there's a lot more buy-in when someone's like, oh, okay, I trust what you're saying. And the knees over toes guy, I think he used a lot of this stuff to rehab his knee, if I'm not mistaken. And then also he's very flexible. He speaks well. He's a good looking dude. And like, I think that as opposed to a power lifter who's like, I don't give a shit what anybody thinks, like all that stuff. Like a lot of people who are former basketball players be like, yeah, I want to be like knees over toes guy. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly right. All right. We're going to keep on rolling here.
All right, cool.
So Dave Tate, pretty much a conjugate guy himself, came into the scene, I don't know if it was before or after they started working with Westside for like the certifications, but he was a staple for a minute here.
So, again, just in terms of the question of transferability,
Yes,
obviously you can develop strength with any of these three versions, right?
most definitely. Yes.
And your personal take on it
Yes.
is that the wide stance, shorter bar path allows you to get the maximum load on the bar,
Yes.
right?
Well, what I explained over here a second ago is when you're dealing with, and we're going to define force. Let's just define force as the bang from the buck at the very start. Okay, bam. You know that explosiveness from the very beginning. Okay, when you're dealing with that, range of motion becomes irrelevant. It's like hitting a baseball. Right. All right. As soon as contact is made, the ball's flying. Right. Throwing a medicine ball or jumping off the floor.
Right.
Okay. So anything that happens after that initial pop doesn't matter. Okay. What we're looking for is that pop. Okay.
That force production, what would you say that is?
I mean, I guess you could apply that to Olympic weightlifting too, right? At a
yeah.
power position, it's the same exact sort of idea.
Yeah. Is he talking about kind of like selective recruitment, meaning like, because I know he was doing like dynamic efforts with like box squat, like stopping at the bottom and then coming up as fast as possible. Like I know that's a big method that he gets behind quite a bit. Is he talking about like, okay, we're trying to train more of the fast twitch muscle fibers before the slow twitch, and just make that the sequence of that more efficient, so that way when you are putting a ton of weight on the bar, everything's already primed and you've trained that explosiveness.
That's probably the product of what he's talking about. I think he's just talking about just like that ability to have that strong contraction and have the raw power output from the start.
Okay.
He's saying, I guess he's saying you're not going to add power as you're going from like, once you start, like that's what you're generating. So getting that first starting drive is important.
Oh, okay. No, yeah, that makes sense.
Into, the Olympic style squat. Now, when you're dealing with that force and when it's being let loose, okay, that becomes more a question now of why you're squatting, what are you squatting for, okay? Because if you need to have, say you're a wrestler, okay, well then maybe that deep explosiveness from that rock bottom position is where you're going to need that explosive strength to be initiated from, okay? Say you're a football player. They're not going to be typically sitting on their heels. They're going to start from a higher position to where they're going to need that explosive force to happen at a higher spot.
So basically he's talking about being able to generate maximal power from all different levels of the squat, wherever you're starting from, whether it's the, like you say, in the bottom or middle or whatever. So, but again, I think this just goes back to more conjugate method stuff, being able, because I feel like the Westside stuff was really maximal strength mixed with GPP, and now he's just trying to find a way to apply it more to sport as opposed to the sport of powerlifting.
Yeah, and he touched on something really interesting, which is the transferability. So like I know it's more common in CrossFit to learn the high bar back squat versus low bar,
right?
Things or like, just conventional squatting or conventional deadlift versus, the sumo versions. And I have to think that a lot of that goes into like, okay, we're also training the Olympic lifts. You're probably going to catch it in these positions when you're doing, 300 air squats in Murph. We're probably not going to be in a wide stance, that kind of stuff. So training stuff that is easily transferable, especially for Gen Pop, to where they don't have to rework what they're doing. They're basically doing the same motor patterns, either loaded or unloaded. And there's a lot of carryover there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. But I guess my question for you would be like, with Gen Pop, is there ever a time that you would decide, okay, today we're going to change up the squat pattern that we've been doing the same way for 3 years, and today you're going to take a wider base and try out, like, would you ever do that for like a group class or for like general population? Because
I think doing something like learning the sumo deadlift to where you're using the glutes in a different way, like I think a lot of people don't know how to recruit certain muscles during a conventional squat or conventional deadlift. And so by switching it up and varying it, it can help people make a little bit more of that mind muscle connection, be like, okay, I'm supposed to be firing this muscle at this time. So that can help. However, like most people just need to learn the basics.
Right.
in my experience. But
Yeah. But you know what? You may have just convinced me, because one of the things that I've done a lot of, well, on and off in our class program is like we've changed up the deadlift a bit. So we've played with sumo once in a while, but we play with like deficit deadlifts and stuff to change the range of motion that they're pulling to kind of load different parts of it, because it's just weird to me that no matter what your size is, your setup is always the same position from the floor, right? So you're only strengthening that. But yeah, you could do the same thing with squats in a sense too.
For sure.
All right, let's get one more from Dave here. I think this is kind of a similar topic, but we'll see if it applies to a broader range.
Yeah. Talked about that. The guy used your example, came with 275 squat.
Yes.
And you fixed a bunch of technique issues.
Yeah.
And he jumped up to 500 and something, right?
Yeah.
But you said he's not that much stronger. You just fixed a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of how much that improvement in his squat, which is dramatic, might translate into capacity anywhere else? Like, do you?
Can't tell you. Can't tell you. That's like the Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot. That's the question everybody wants to try to answer, but I'm telling you right now, nobody can prove it. All right, you'll get answers from everybody. I'm the no bullshit guy. All right, I'm not gonna fucking lie about anything. You know, if what you're saying is having a bigger squat is going to carry over and make somebody a better football player, prove it. It's all an educated guess. You know, I would go as far as to even say, you know what? Show me a better conditioned athlete is a better athlete on the football field, and prove it. I'm telling you, people are going to be hard pressed, because everyone you show me, I'm going to show you the kid that doesn't do shit for training, who thumps his ass every day in practice. Everything's an educated guess based upon your philosophy and what you believe. That's where you got to be open to a lot of different ideas. And that's why I started the whole thing with that philosophy part, because all we can do is what we're passionate about and what we believe in, throw our cards on the table and hope that it works. That's
All right. What do you think of that?
I think that's sports in a nutshell. You know, like I know, I mean, I played baseball in college, and like there's plenty of guys that were monsters in the gym, and they developed tons and tons of, you know, athletic ability in the gym. And then you put them out on the field and they're striking out 3 times, you know, like, so, you know, you're either a good baseball player or you're not, or you're going to take the stuff that you practice in practice and you're going to apply it in game, or you're not. I'm sure you've run into this too. There's plenty of people that are setting crazy PRs in practice, and they're doing all the stuff. They followed all the progressions, and then on game day, they just fall flat. And vice versa, you get people who are kind of mediocre in practice, but once they're under the lights, they show up, you know? So I think that's maybe what he's alluding to a little bit.
That's a good point. But his example of like, you have someone who's squatting, well conditioned, and then they get to the game and then they get thumped by the person who hasn't been doing shit, like, you know, run over, blocking, whatever. You're always looking at kind of the, you know, your genetics versus your environmental training, what you've done, what you've been exposed to, things like that. And obviously there are going to be people who have some advantage. If we talk about some 15-year-old kid in high school who happens to be 250 already, and he's running over somebody who's working their ass off in the gym because they're underdeveloped or whatever. Yeah. Like that's not really a good reason to say that you shouldn't be training, you shouldn't be conditioning or doing the strength because this genetically large kid is running you over. Like you would think in sport, you would give yourself every possible advantage that you could by putting that work in and then trying to apply it on the field. So by just saying like, I don't know, best guess. Yeah, I guess he's probably alluding to what I'm saying, but at the same time, it's just like, of course you should try. And of course, this gives you a more likelihood of success than not.
100%. I mean, and that's frankly, I think why a lot of people don't just follow CrossFit main site, you know, because the things that you're doing in practice will yield certain results in game if you're a competitive person. You know, if I just went in and followed main site, I think it would be very hard for someone at this point to qualify for the CrossFit Games only doing that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's not enough exposure in that alone.
Exactly. There's not enough natural talent to just be like, oh, they're just good, you know? And so I think, yeah, 100% the things that you do in training, yeah, it's the best guy, especially in this sport, because it's all unknown and unknowable, but to prepare them the best way that we all know how, I think is what we should be doing, you know, in the strength world for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, something that was kind of interesting too is that, you know, he was talking a little bit about, I lost my train of thought. Should have written it down. Anyway, whatever. But yeah.
Maybe the next video will help you bring it back to mind. Let's see.
All right. Yeah.
All right. We're going to switch gears to Rippetoe, but if your thought
Sweet.
pops up, just share.
Awesome.
All right. I just like this video because actually, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but deadlift is my favorite lift to coach. I feel like, I guess maybe I do know why. Maybe it's because you can see, especially in newer athletes, fast progress in the deadlift. When you change their angle, you teach them how to like push through like all the things you can instill in them. And then
I remember my thought. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's interesting that he was talking, and this goes to what you're talking about changing the angles and yielding like immediate improvements there. And I think that Budding's question about, you know, the little tweaks that he made and then the guy's improvement immediately, a lot of times we'll look at technique as the lowest hanging fruit. Like take like pull-ups, for example, right? So if someone came to me and let's say they were like, I don't know, 20 plus body fat percentage, something like that, you know, they're walking around with a little extra weight, whatever. And they're like, hey, I can do 3 kipping pull-ups or 5 kipping pull-ups or something like that. Or let's say they can already do like 10 plus, but they're like, I just gas out so hard. I'm like, well, there's really 3 ways that we can improve this. The first, imagine that you have a boat, right? Going in the water. You can either add more power to the boat, like a new engine. So that'd be like improving pulling strength, right? So that way you're just generating more force every pull. You can lighten the drag on the boat, meaning like, okay, let's talk about maybe losing a little bit of weight. And then that way you're pulling less weight every time, right? And then the third and lowest hanging thing would be like, oh, well, your arms are like super, super wide when you're doing this, or you're gripping the bar weird or something like that, or your kip is just super fucked up. And if we just fix that, like you're going to see immediate improvement. So I think that's kind of like maybe what he's referring to there. And that I also like teaching the deadlift too for that reason, is because you can just tweak a couple things and then the bar just shoots up and they're like, whoa, you know, or even differences in effort. Cause most newbies, they don't know how to like try really hard. So they'll be doing like a push press and they're going up super slow. I'm like, I want you to push that thing up as if you're trying to send it to the ceiling. And then and you're like, see, you know, like,
and when you can see when they get it, you're like, aha, again. They're like, oh, I get it. I feel it. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. That's just, yeah, agreed. Same thing with the deadlift.
And I want you to put the middle of your foot under the bar. Now, the middle of your foot is not the part of your foot you can see. Okay? It's the middle of your foot. Now that's too much. Right about there. No, centimeter forward, about there. Now, I want everybody to look at this. His foot is cut in 2.
Rippetoe is so slow and deliberate.
I know. Yeah, I feel like
teaches.
say something like, I'm going to let this sink in and breathe for a second.
Cut in 2. Half the foot on one side, half the foot on the other.
It's so slow.
And that's not what you're going to see when you're looking at it from the top. You're going to see that the bar is very, very close to your shin. But
it's a good video to learn from.
Yeah.
You can now spot that position against your shoelaces. And that allows you to reproduce it quite exactly every time you come to the bar.
He could have just said, put your shoelaces under the bar. Yeah, just moved right on from there.
Bro, they wouldn't have the impact, you know?
It's true.
It's all in the delivery.
He does command my attention.
He does, yeah.
Okay.
And he's wearing a belt and his shirt stuck in. That also commands my attention.
Always. He's got tea time in 30 minutes. He's got to get out of there.
You're going to apply the best power to the floor. Okay. For you, that's probably going to be just a tiny bit narrower. Just tiniest bit. About like that. Okay. Now make sure you're in the middle of the bar when you do this. Okay. Now, without lowering your hips, I want you to take a grip on the bar just outside your legs. Leave your ass up in the air. Don't move the bar. Now, bend your knees.
I have a question for you whenever it's done.
Stop.
Go.
So question, when you're teaching deadlift, do you think it's because a lot of times this happens in a class setting and we don't have, like 30 minutes for each person to like, go in and dial this in the way Rippetoe's doing. I mean, there's like group explanation and stuff, but do you feel like, let's say you get someone who comes in during open gym or something, do you normally explain everything like this before they even touch the bar? Or are you like, hey, let me put a unweighted bar into your hands, explain the basics of the deadlift and then have them do it and then make tweaks from there? What's your normal go-to?
It actually depends, honestly. So I have like I have one of my gyms does a foundations program because the area that gym's located in is very unexposed to fitness and CrossFit. So they're very, very green when they come in. So I'm taking them through like PVC pipe, squeeze the bar, set up like this, push through your feet. It's very, very simple and raw. Whereas if they're in a class, they already know the basics of it. So I'm going straight to the barbell and then I'm reinforcing the technique from there. So it depends if they have any experience with the deadlift or zero experience with the deadlift. If they have some empty bar, I'm probably starting with like RDL, stretch the hamstring, and then I'm going to talk about the 1 or 2 simple points of performance that I'm going to hone in on for that day.
That makes sense. What
about you?
More of that approach. I used to, I realized at a certain point, I tried to keep the explanation to like the most important things. And then during warm-ups and stuff, you can kind of also see just how people move. And I'm sure, you could speak to this. Once you get experienced enough as a coach in a group setting, you can kind of already know, like, I'm going to need to, once I finish this general explanation, I need to go over there and talk to them, and so just get the general stuff going. A lot of the experienced people, I've already seen them deadlift anyway. So they'll get started, go triage with like the new members or the people that are inexperienced with the lift, and then work my way out from there.
The deadlift also is the easiest lift, I think, to cue. So you can make a huge adjustment with a couple simple words or a little touch. Whereas like if you was snatch day and someone's not getting something, there could be something so wrong with the way that they're snatching, they're not connecting the dots. Whereas deadlift, I think, is easier to make that like immediate change.
For sure. And I think that there's ways to do it in a class to where you can kind of hit multiple boxes at the same time. So a good example, and I learned this from one of our earliest coaches, Tim Thackeray. And what he would do is like, he would notice, let's say everybody's doing the stripper deadlift, like, kicking their butt way up in the air immediately upon the lift, extending their knees. And he's like, all right, a lot of people in this class are doing this. Rather than just stopping everybody and being like, hey guys, you're all doing this, blah, 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 blah. What he would do is he would find someone who made a breakthrough and they're not doing it anymore. He'd be like, all right, guys, everybody stop. I want you guys to check out Becky over here. Becky used to do this, and now she's in a good position. She's not kicking her hips back. She's not extending the knees early. Becky, can you show us real quick? And then she would get praised. She'd get highlighted in front of everybody. She'd demonstrate what everyone needs to correct. And everybody doesn't also accept that as like a negative thing. Like, hey, you're all fucking this up. They're like, oh yeah, I got to make sure I do that too. Does that make sense?
If I could be like Becky, then I would. Yeah.
I just need to be like Becky,
Need to be like Becky. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's I like doing this a similar thing like that. All right, we're gonna wrap up here in a second. Is there before we close up? Is there anything you want to promote? Talk about?
We've had obviously, we're super happy that my wife Haley and Velvet Minnick from 460 Fitness, they've qualified for the semifinals for the age groups. We were super happy with their quarterfinals performances. I think my wife got 47th, so she was just outside of the semifinal for the East.
Oh shoot!
She actually would have placed like 20th on the West, but
that's a topic for another day. Yeah,
it is what it is. But so she's going to do that. That starts this week. Haley Adams is going to be at the East semifinal, so we're super pumped for that. We've had a lot of people reach out as far as like their season has ended and they're looking for some individual coaching into next season. I think we're going to talk as a team and possibly release something soon to where people have an opportunity to jump on that if that's where they're at. But yeah, for now, if you want to follow me, go to Josh in the Gym, follow my wife, Haley Amber at Haley Amber. And perfect. Follow Seth. And follow Jump Ship.
Yeah. Follow all of us. We're all going to contribute something positive to you, right?
Oh, and also, is this going on YouTube?
Yeah.
Subscribe. Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's been
You
my
guys,
mission
if
lately.
you like the show, I'm sure you watch the other shows. Put your mouse on the subscribe button right now. Click it. Hit the notification bell. It helps him out. This will get seen by more people if you do. And
Do you
leave a
have your own show?
No, I used to have a podcast a couple of years ago, but I just I don't know. I was an audio engineer, and once I realized that there needed to be a video component, I was just like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. I learned audio and all that stuff, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll start something again soon. But
I'm a
that's right
complete tech know nothing, and so and for years and years, people like after I exited the Misfit situation, people like, please do a show, please do a podcast, please do something. And I until I could wrap my head around just like streaming live through the StreamYard software onto YouTube, which takes no editing, no nothing. We just go. I screw up all the time. No one cares. It's a lot of fun, and like this I can get behind because it's just find 45 minutes with somebody and talk through it. And this has been like the most fun ever. So anyway, you should do something like this because I'd like to hear what you have to say more often, or you can come back on my show anytime you want.
I would love to, bro.
Okay.
Just let me know.
Okay. Awesome.
But yeah, maybe I'll start that. I get always wrapped up in analysis paralysis and being like, the lighting's not good. It needs to sound great and this and that. And it's like, I don't know if that's really the case anymore. I just need to start cranking shit out. So.
It'll evolve into if you love it, it'll evolve into what it needs to be eventually, right? You just can't, because that's what I did. I waited and waited, like I can't do it because I don't have the microphone. I don't have a camera. I'm on my crappy laptop. But like now I'm just doing it, and maybe 3 months from now I'll get a camera. Maybe 6 months from now I'll get a second monitor. Like I don't care. I'm just gonna do it now.
Yeah. No, it's good, man. It's a good show.
It's fun. Thank you. I appreciate you being a part of it, and we will do this again soon.
For sure, bro.
Guys, thanks for tuning in. See you guys later.